I wanted to choose an image to represent the zeitgeist of the time in which we live. And this was the one in which I chose. Fear, uncertainty, doubt, mistrust, and misgivings. We live in a world that seems filled with horrible, intractable problems. And yet there is hope. There are ways that we can move forward together. Machine intelligence offers us a tremendous opportunity to solve the world's problems in new ways. We can look at a very difficult issue, like trying to get around the loss of data from an image that was taken at night. And we can apply machine intelligence to rebuild it, to create information which was never captured in the first place. How do we do this? One model of it might be the following. My clicker isn't working, so I'm going to sit here, I think, if you don't mind. In the world, there are lots of correlations. There are correlations between, for example, the sides of our face. One tends to mirror the other. Other times, people with big hands also tend to have big feet. These are simple and obvious. But many correlations in our world are very strange and tenuous and are difficult to understand. We might know them in an intuitive sense, but describing the reasons why we have those beliefs may be very difficult. Machine intelligence is able to dig into those. Machine intelligence is able to spot all of these tiny little correlations and bring them to the surface in a way that has never been possible before. Essentially, what we have today is a means of making sense out of chaos and automating the ineffable for the very first time. Ineffable, of course, means that which you have no effing clue how to describe in either words or mathematics. But as we attempt to make sense of this world, there are many hazards along the way. Today, about 50% of the traffic on the web is human beings, and the other half is bots. And the majority of those are doing naughty things. They are impersonating human beings or finding ineffable ways to mess with our heads. Now, creating rules for how we use these technologies is very important, and I'm glad that a lot of people in the world are working on this. But I think that we need more. Machines are in many ways like little toddlers, trying to understand the world, just like we did when we were little. And they're trying to understand us as well. And heaven knows we human beings are an odd sort. Sometimes the best way to learn is through things like stories, examples, and role models. There is an emerging domain called machine ethics, also known as value alignment. It's about teaching machines how to understand and recognize the preferences that we have for how we engage with people in the world. I'm working on a project called EthicsNet, which is trying to find examples of pro-social behavior, virtual role models, or Saturday morning cartoons for machines in order to understand what virtuous and kind behavior looks like. We want to capture basic behavioral norms that make society function in a happier and richer manner. I believe that this cannot be done by a few dusty academics somewhere in a university or two. It must be done by all of us acting together as a global village. For it takes a village to raise a child, as they say, and it will take our global village to enable the raise of the machines. But this may be a tricky task in our present age. The internet was supposed to bring us together, to erase all of these transnational boundaries. Unfortunately, it hasn't always worked out that way, the way that we would prefer. We live in a world of very intense polarization, of people pulling apart. And worse, it's not just people's opinions, but entire industries are becoming very polarized as well. This means that if you have the wrong polarity, you may be essentially locked out of entering an industry. In the 20th century, we made some great strides in protecting people from age or gender or ethnic discrimination. But we haven't yet to really master the art of protecting people from political discrimination. And the world of big tech is not really making it easier. I want your help. I want your help with culturalpeace.org, where we are trying to create something like a Geneva Conventions for our ongoing cultural conflicts, to help protect the innocent and to ensure that people can manage conflict in a way that creates less problems for the world. We've been trying to deal with these problems for a very long time indeed. If we go back to the fossil record and the archaeological record, we see that the very first cities were these great big conurbations that came and went and disappeared again for 1,000 years. Archaeologists have looked and tried to figure out, was it pestilence? Was it famine? Why did these civilizations come and go so quickly? Why did we abandon the idea of living in cities for 1,000 years? This is Çatalhöyük. It's one of the very first cities we ever had in the world. And if we look at it, we see that there are lots of little square dwellings all kind of clustered together, a bit like a hive. These people had just transitioned from a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. They were the first farmers in the world. And of course, with farming, if you get lucky, you can turn 1x of effort into 10x of output. Some people, of course, got luckier than others, and that created inequities in society. And it meant that some people were perhaps jealous of others, and that led to tensions in that society. And there's a very good theory that this is why those civilizations fell apart. They didn't have the right technologies for building trust, and so they abandoned the cities and went back to living in little hamlets. There is no greater predictor of happiness in any society on this earth at any time in our planet's history. There's no greater correlation for happiness than trust. If you believe that your neighbor generally has your best interests in their heart, you can sleep soundly in your bed at night. A way of describing trust might be consistency over time. And what tends to create consistency? Coordination. If we skip forward from Çatalhöyük to Babylon and Ur, we see the creation of things like the Code of Hammurabi, which enabled coordination in brand new ways. And coordination and trust have a wonderful positive feedback mechanism. This enabled a much more complex form of society, where we have boroughs and suburbs and stratification and priests and palaces, yes, but also tremendous division of labor and amazing new feats of art and culture. If we fast forward a little bit further, we get to the Ottoman invasion of Vienna the second time in around 1682. The Ottomans gave up in the end and went home, but they left behind something very important that most of you have engaged with already today: coffee. From the coffee houses, we could have an intellectual conversation for the first time. It created an interface between people who otherwise could only meet in a university or a salon. We could exchange pamphlets and news from all around the world and build trust with each other. From the first coffee houses, of course, came the first stockbroking companies and the first insurance companies in the world. And this ability to pool capital in a way that created new forms of safety between people enabled the Industrial Revolution. We couldn't have had it without this increase in trust and shared knowledge. The ancient Greeks almost had the same technology to be able to have their own Industrial Revolution, but they lacked this missing component. And when it came, it changed everything. And it continues to change everything, not just in ourselves, but in the world that we live in as well. We learn from this that societies tend to increase in complexity when coordination and trust become easier. And if coordination and trust become harder, they must inevitably collapse down to a state which is once again sustainable. These things are very, very important. We live in an age where we are creating new forms of building trust and coordination in radically new ways. Technologies derivative of blockchain, which I call machine economics, enable us to create new ways of engaging with each other, which align incentives in happy, safe ways for people, and in a radically decentralized manner, which is much harder to corrupt or to co-opt. We're starting to see the emergence of really interesting new technologies as well. For example, suppose you wanted to play this hidden object game with a couple of children, and you wanted to show that yes, you have indeed found the blue egg, but you don't want to give the game away of where exactly it is, because that would spoil the fun. You could, perhaps, create a mask that shows nothing but that blue egg, and then move its position to another area. And so you could demonstrate that you had discovered it, but not the exact specifics. And this, in essence, is the core of zero-knowledge proofs, something which is going to change the world in the 2020s by enabling us to have our cake and eat it with regards to transparency and privacy. Other technologies, such as swarm intelligence, are enabling us to create an instant democratic quorum on any given problem that you can imagine, any given issue. Collectively, dozens of people can make one decision to truly harness the wisdom of the crowd in ways which weren't possible before. The might of the Industrial Revolution continues, and we are able to produce amazing stuff of intricate complexity at immense scale. And yet, on the other side, our technologies for managing consumption haven't really improved much in the past few decades. Production is lean, but consumption is not, or at least not yet. But I think we have an opportunity to change that. Governments, good governments, which try to govern well, tend to be interested in the management and accounting of externalities. Externalities is that economics term which describes when you do something that affects an unrelated third party, things like pollution, for example. Governments may try to manage externalities, but on the other hand, our modern life is in many ways predicated upon privatizing the benefits of the social and industrial development we've seen and socializing the costs to other people. When we enjoy 10 minutes of convenience from the local store, we may create an externality that lasts for 10,000 years and affects people very far away, perhaps people that haven't even been born yet. In the 20th century, we had the legacies of tetraethyl lead and lead paint. And although we've stopped using those decades ago now, they're still embedded in the walls, they're still embedded in the ground and in the soil, and they're still giving children brain damage in inner city regions. We're beginning to learn for the first time just how much our effects are so widespread. The Google Street View car, which comes through your neighborhood once or twice a year, doesn't just have cameras on it, it now has sensors. And they recently discovered that one industry, ammonium nitrate fertilizer, emitted 3 times more methane than all the other US industry combined, vastly more than anyone ever believed was possible. But we can put this together, we can aggregate this data using things like OpenAQ, openairquality.org, and we can begin to create a map of who is doing what, holding them accountable and seeking redress. I describe this as automated externality accounting, or if you want to put it another way, the Internet of Planet. I'd like to start a conversation at pacha.org, P-A-C-H-A. I would like you to join. I would like you to contribute your ideas on how we can build this kind of new layer of economics to create a happier and greener society. We can create a more fair and equitable society with greater profits, which preserves the environment and which creates less social externalities. For I'm just going to finish on this point. The Industrial Revolution helped us with many of our needs, particularly those at the bottom of the pyramid. But the higher needs we have not yet found good solutions for, or at least we haven't industrialized them yet. But I believe that we have an opportunity to do just that in the 2020s and beyond. We try to solve our higher problems with the technologies that we created to solve the lower ones. But that doesn't work. That's not what makes people happy. Nothing will make you happier than realizing that you can lean on the shoulder of a good friend when times are tough. And nothing will make you despair more than realizing that a relationship that you once dearly enjoyed is, for whatever reason, no more. Some animals have to eat meat to survive. We call them obligate carnivores. Human beings are obligately social. Moreover, we are obligately cooperative beings. And we are coming to a new age which respects that cooperation and interdependence. The first Industrial Revolution was about augmenting muscle, the muscle of strong people and strong animals. The Informational Revolution was about augmenting the mind, helping us to move and store information in new ways and to share it. We're coming to an augmentation of the human heart and soul, and it's coming through this confluence of machine intelligence's ability to solve very complex problems, machine economics' ability to align incentives and create trust in new ways, and machine ethics, the ability to put all of this to the finest of human purposes that really exalt what it means to be a human being. But it's not going to be an interdependence revolution. It's going to be a reformation. And through this reformation, we are going to create a way of living on this planet which respects it and all of its inhabitants, not just Homo sapiens sapiens. We can have all of this if we come together as a species to put a little bit of heart and soul into that cold and distant machine. Thank you so much.